I'd like to call this meeting to order, Administration and Finance Committee. Roll call, please.
Dr. Gopi? Here. Dr. Gopi is present. Mr. Castile? Mr. Castile is not present. Dr. Davis?
Here.
Dr. Davis is present. Ms. Ellis?
Here.
Ms. Ellis is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Holloway?
Here.
Ms. Holloway is present. Mr. Melreen is not present. Mr. Morris?
Here.
Ms. Morris is present. Ms. Orange Jones?
Here.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Rock? Mr. Rock is not present. Ms. Bochay is not present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 3.1, 4.1, and 4.2.
Motion. Dr. Davis and Mr. Garvey, second. That's it. No objections. Motion carried. Mr. Castillo is here. Please note this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
On page 51, item 4.3, consideration of a report from school system financial services staff regarding Bessie authorized charter school budgets and expenditure reports, including irregularities or concerns. Recommendation is to receive the report.
Motion, please. Ms. Owens, and seconded by Dr. Davis. Thank you. Any concerns, comments, objections? Motion carried. Next item, please.
On page 57, item 4.4, consideration of LDE and RSD contracts of $50,000 and over. Recommendation is to approve.
Motion, please. Mr. Garvey, seconded by Dr. Davis. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Morris.
I had a question on page 110, in reference to the $2 billion capital program. Just wanted somebody to speak to that.
Page 7, I'm sorry.
110.
I'm sorry. Yes, Mike.
Andy Cambria, RSD. What was your question?
Yeah, I just want to get some brief summary, whatever, with regard to the $2 billion capital program.
Sure, this is the, thank you, sorry. This is the $2 billion school facility master plan program. This has been happening since 2010, and this program is wrapping up, so construction will be complete in the first quarter of 2023. And so this is due to ongoing litigation costs from that program, but this program is really at the end.
Sorry, this program is for?
At the end, it's related to Katrina. These are Katrina dollars that came from FEMA in 2010, and so this is the end of the program.
Okay, so this isn't new?
This is not new, no. There's some ongoing multi-party litigation that we're prosecuting and defending from one of the projects, and it's an 80 building project in Orleans Parish, and we are at the very end of the program. Like I said, construction will be wrapping up within the first quarter of 23.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next item, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Any other questions? Any concerns? One more, Mr. Morris.
On page 93, as a result, the Louisiana Department of Education received approximately $972 million to support these efforts. Just make sure that is that the right number? For child care service providers for COVID?
Yes, Danielle Mitchell with the Louisiana Department of Education, that is correct. That's the total amount of pandemic relief dollars, CCDF dollars that were received. It was close to $1 billion.
And that's over multiple allocations.
Yes, that's multiple allocations of all of the CCDF tranches that were received in the 3 stimulus packages.
Oh, so these are ESSER funds?
No, these are CCDF funds, but they are the pandemic relief dollars the portion of CCDF dollars that were received in the 3 stimulus packages. So just like ESSER was for the K-12 work, our birth through 4-year-olds also received tranches of stimulus dollars.
Got it. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morris. We do have some recusals. Yes, Dr. Bovee?
4.4, Lafayette Parish Contract 5, and then 4.5, I'll wait.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Davis?
I need to recuse myself from item 4.4, the VOA Regions 2, 3, and 4, VOA Regions 5, 6, and 7, and LSU's Ag Center amendment.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Any objections? Motion carried. Next item, please.
On page 111, item 4.5, consideration of federal and state grants and allocations to LEAs, type 2 charters, type 5 charters, approved non-public schools and community-based organizations, competitive and other recommendations to approve.
The motion, please. Mr. Garvey and Mr. Rock, second. Any questions, concerns, any recusals, please? Yes, Mr. Castillo.
Yes, I'd like to recuse from this item new schools choices pending approval funding.
Yes, Dr. Davis.
I need to
Wait,
recuse.
1 second, Dr. Gill. You okay, Ms. You good?
I need to recuse from the Volunteers of America Greater Baton Rouge Early Childhood Curriculum Reimbursement.
Thank you, Dr. Bovee.
CSBAE grant, early childhood guides, Ready Start networks, early childhood curriculum reimbursement, real tutoring, and Louisiana Healthy School Communities Project.
Thank you. Ms. Ellis.
I need to recuse on REAL, REAL tutoring, and Louisiana Healthy School Communities Project.
Anyone else? Any questions, concerns, any objections? Motion carried. Next item, please.
On page 149, item 4.6, consideration of an update report on Louisiana Department of Education progress toward meeting key performance indicators for ESSER investments. Recommendation is to receive the report.
Motion, Ms. Ellis, and Dr. Bovee, second. Thank you.
Ms. Holloway, this is just a continuation of our commitment to share out key performance indicators with the board at various intervals throughout the year. Ms. Danielle Mitchell will present the report, and as promised that in light of our timing situation, that she will be brief, but certainly answer any questions anyone has.
Sure, thank you.
Danielle Mitchell, Louisiana Department of Education, as the superintendent stated. To be respectful of everyone's time, I am going to go through the portions that are repetitive rather quickly. If there are any questions, or if I'm going too fast, feel free to stop me, ask any questions at a time, or feel free to reach out to me afterwards. So one of the updates that we wanted to be able to provide this week was around our 5-year strategic plan, which is tied to our annual budget. And we are actually working right now on updating that 5-year strategic plan in alignment with our belief to achieve educational priorities. And that work is supported by our internal operational plan, which you all have heard us talk about numerous times. And then, of course, the daily work that we execute is what results in the work that touches our students and educators in our school systems. So just a quick update on the timeline for our DOA strategic plan update. That's a 5-year plan that we are required by statute to provide, but it actually gets updated every 3 years. So this is the time right now where we're allowed to update that, and we're putting in language and adjusting some of the initiatives to align with our internal operational plan, the work that you all have seen. So we're excited to have that update. And one of the other things that we wanted to highlight before we get into some of the dollars that we're very excited to share with you all today is the funding process. So what you'll see as we highlight some of the numbers that school systems have budgeted and where we're at in our spend down with all ESSER 1, 2, and 3, these funds work on a reimbursement basis. which means essentially we communicate to school systems the amount of dollars that they'll receive. They go into a system called EGMS, Electronics Grants Management System, and they budget those funds. Then they commit those dollars and they pay with their own money for those expenses, and then they submit reimbursement requests. At that point, then the LDOE reviews those reimbursement requests, draws down the funds, and provides those to the school systems. And then we go back to the federal government and we get our actual reimbursement, just like the school system asks for reimbursements from us. So what you'll see is that even though the spin down rates may not seem as fast as what we would anticipate, it doesn't mean that the work isn't happening. Our school systems are actively using these dollars, actively submitting reimbursement requests. It's just that some school systems will often wait until the end of an academic year to submit their reimbursement request for expenses carried out over the duration of that year. So I just wanted to note that caveat, and we outlined this process. So hopefully that's a helpful visual for you all to understand how the money flows. Of course, our 3 tranches of ESSER funds, the first one, the period of obligation is nearing. So we are almost fully spent, well, we're actually fully obligated with all of those funds, but as you can see, we've got September 2023 and 2024 ahead of us. Those are our largest pots of funds, and those are the funds that we have available right now that we'll be focused on. So as you can see, of our total ESSER award, and actually this is about a month and a half old, so I would say the spin down rates are even greater than this, but we are nearly fully expended of our ESSER 1. We are in line with national trends for the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 amounts. This is the formula dollars, so this is the portion, the 90% that flows out to our school systems, very similar numbers. And then of course this is our state set aside. The one caveat about the ESSER 1 dollars, that total remaining amount, the majority of that, if not all of that, is actually what we flowed out to school systems. They are just in the process of submitting those reimbursement requests. So we have absolutely no concerns about leaving any ESSER 1 dollars on the table. And remember, if we don't spend these dollars within the period of availability, we do have to revert those back to the federal government. So one of my jobs, and the job of really our fiscal operations and our grants management team in collaboration, is to ensure that we are not only good stewards of these dollars, but that we are spending them down. Not only us here at the agency, but also our school systems. So this is going to be very familiar to you all. The numbers have not changed very much at all. We've been pretty steady in our commitment of our funds. So again, about $323 million of our state set aside has been dedicated to the priorities as you see here.
Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
the question, Ms. Baldwin.
That's.
I'm pretty sure I have the right interpretation on your pie charts. On slide 13, for example, the last one, looks like it says total remaining 95.7%. The way I understood the message was that we were spending the money according to the plan, but this much money is still remaining. I think I have the wrong interpretation. Can you help me out with that, make sure I interpret it correctly?
Absolutely. So the dollars being committed are different than the dollars actually being like liquidated or spent out, right? So if the dollars have been committed and obligated, then a purchase or contractual obligation could have been entered into. But the reimbursement of those funds would happen afterwards, once a reimbursement request is reviewed and
So the
approved.
pie chart is the reimbursement?
That's right, the actual like liquidation of those funds.
Thank you. And then your deadlines on slide 11 for ESSER 1, September 22. You have to complete your reimbursements by September 22, or you have to complete your obligations by September 22?
Really great question, our obligation. And so then we have another 90 days, I believe, to actually then fully liquidate. So we're working closely with our fiscal operations team to ensure all of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so a new table of information today is going to be how are our LEAs, our school systems, investing these dollars. So we've shown you all how the state has invested these dollars, but we thought it was going to be really important this time to share how our schools are investing their dollars. And then in October, we'll be bringing a lot of updates around our KPIs because that's when we'll have new data. We don't have any new data from the last time that we presented to this time, but we did want to show you a breakdown. So as you recall, the LDOE investments consist of two activities, our state level activities or the allocations that we flow through to our school systems. What you see here is how they have budgeted the dollars that we've actually flowed out to them from our state set-aside portion. This is the way that they have budgeted their dollars of their formula portion. Again, that's 90%, and I believe total is about $3.3 billion that has been allocated to our school systems. Of that, what we see in approved budgets is about $2.5 billion. That does not mean that the other billion or so has not been planned for. It just means that perhaps those budgets are in approval process, or they're pending, or they're being amended. But what we're going to share today is some updates around the $2.5 billion that you see there. So again, this is not new, the same information that you've seen previously, but what is new, and I'm going to get to it in my notes, is how are our school systems budgeting these dollars. So for the first priority, we saw three major areas. First around credentials, second around IGPs, and then ACT. And I am prepared to kind of talk just briefly about each one so that you all can get an idea of what those investments look like. So for example, for credentials, we have Jefferson Parish at $3 million investing in CTE and credit recovery, Point Coupee around creating a new pathway, and we've got Webster Parish around culinary art classes and then a barber styling pathway. So some really neat and innovative things that we're seeing from our school systems in these investments. For IGPs, we had Evangeline Parish who invested in 4 college and career readiness strategists. So they are coming in and individually planning with each of their students to make sure that they are on track to graduate. We have Ouachita Parish who got some graduation coaches for IGP and diploma endorsement monitoring. And then for ACT, we have a lot of our school systems investing in ACT vouchers so that their students can take the tests and have more access to post-secondary opportunities.
Can you speak a little bit more detail on the last one on the ACT investment? Are we talking about freshmen, sophomores, juniors? What level are we talking about where these new opportunities are made available?
Very good question. So it's actually all. It's all of the above. Pre-ACT to ACT for all levels of high school. Additionally, we're seeing investments being made into ACT prep, ACT supports, tutoring, help like that, ACT mastery prep classes, ACT prep teachers to implement them, mastery prep, ACT workbooks. So everything around helping a student be fully prepared for the ACT.
Okay, and you'll have KPIs for us for the IGP investment and the ACT investment, so we can see what kind of return we're getting on that?
Absolutely, as well as the credentials. Okay, next priority is priority 2, and what we're seeing our school systems invest in, we heard this mentioned earlier, behavioral mental health is one of the largest investments overall that we're seeing under this priority, as well as supports for our diverse learners and English learners. Some really amazing work is happening with behavioral mental health investments. We've got overall about $41 million going towards investing in counselors, social workers, coordinators, coaches to support mental and behavioral health across the state. So we had one parish bring on additional 10 social workers and mental health providers over the course of 4 years. Another parish has 9 social, emotional, mental health screeners and nurses and supports. So we're really excited about those investments. Our supports for diverse learners, we have different interventionists, full-time curriculum content coordinators, 504 coordinators, operating before and after school summer learning programs. And then same kind of things that we're seeing for our supports for English learners. We have one parish who's actually investing in an English learner newcomer welcome center. And as students transition to school as first-time students in the U.S. and during district-led after-school and summer accelerated programs, they are fully staffing those for the next 4 years. So just evidence of some really strong work that we're seeing from our school system.
Quick question about the behavioral mental health investment, the $90 million. Were there enough resources, human resources available so that help is face-to-face? Or is any of this being able to use technology, leverage technology so that, they can do this with phone calls or Zoom calls or whatever? Just trying to understand how it's being addressed and if there are different approaches being taken or everybody's taking the same approach.
Really great question. And the answer is people are taking the approach that best meets their need as well as what they can access. So to be very honest, no, there is a shortage of mental health professionals, like across the state, not just for K-12 education, everywhere. And so what we're seeing with our school systems is they are being very creative to do everything within their power to provide supports and services to their students, whether that's contracting with third party, hiring their own full-time staff, or using technology to bring in those resources to students who may not otherwise be able to access them. You're welcome. Priority 3, high-quality teaching and learning. The largest investments here that we're seeing, and again, these are our focus areas, so the range of what potentially we're seeing invested in each of these does vary widely, which is why I'm going to call out some of the biggest investments that we're seeing. So for learning recovery, we actually have a lot of our school systems investing in summer learning, almost $140 million. Tutoring, nearly $76 million. After school, nearly $34 million. We've got one parish who is, for example, to address student learning loss, they are implementing a district-run Accelerate Unfinished Learning after-school program for K through 8 for 4 years, and they are fully staffing that, as well as providing additional instructional time and summer learning opportunities. So we're really excited to see the investments, and I know that the department has worked really hard to put out quality guidance and resources for our school systems to implement quality programs to help accelerate learning. For our instructional resources, a lot of this is to support some of the learning recovery, and so for our curricular supplements, materials, supplies, we see a total of about $164 million for student devices and MiFi connectivity. We see about $33 million across the state. And then for academic standards, this is really going to a lot of staff support, funding for staff to actually support and implement the learning recovery for the mastery of standards. So for example, we see in one parish, they hired 5 instructional teachers to support in school high dosage tutoring for their students, summer learning for their students in grades PK through 12, and they hired 10 intervention teachers to support data-driven interventions for students' needs. For the next priority, an effective educator workforce, we're seeing a lot of investment in educator compensation. As you heard earlier, the workforce for educators is facing great challenges right now. Like other fields across the country, it is difficult to keep and to attract, recruit, retain high-quality teachers. So a lot of our school systems have been creative with utilizing their funds as providing a way to retain their effective educators. And so we do see our salaries, benefits for compensation, and or stipends around $164 million across all of the tranches of money, but specifically associated to the effective educator workforce, it's around 56.3. Additionally, we see the job-embedded PD, a lot of professional development partners, high-quality partners, as well as curriculum content coaches, teaching and learning specialists, and stipends for their teachers to attend some of the professional development opportunities. And then, of course, we have our instructional leadership teams, and that is a lot, again, of our staff salaries, and that comes out to around $27 million. and then the other dollars are being spent on resources and contracting with partners to come and provide support and training to school systems. The last priority is our system structures and partnerships. Again, we have school systems who are, when they're selecting these focus areas, they are in essence selecting the category that they would align with their line item. So you're going to see some of the same investments repeated across these three areas specifically. So for our COVID-19 guidance and support, we're seeing the largest investment being made in our salaries and stipends to support maintaining the educator workforce as well as the workforce for support and staff. Then we have about almost 15 million going to transportation. So that's not just additional buses, but actually the cost to operate those buses as well as the bus drivers. And then we have capital facility indoor air quality improvements that are tied to the COVID-19 guidance at $251 million. For school improvement, kind of the same two categories, our capital facility indoor air quality improvements are about $44 million of that 89, and salaries and benefits for compensation and or stipends are about $13 million of that 89. And then last, but certainly not least, is the relief funding support. Again, the same two categories, our capital facility indoor air quality improvements is around $67 million. Our salaries and benefits for compensation is around $10 million. So, as stated, we will be bringing a KPI update in October. Now that you've seen some of the investments that not only we as the state are making, but also that our LEAs are making, we know that we're going to get data over the coming months and be prepared to bring updates on all of the KPIs that you all have seen in previous presentations. So what you can expect is that we will have the initiative, objectives, and indicators with updated data, as well as the current data so that you can see the difference. What is the change over that time? And then, as well as we're going to have some key takeaways, what is the department doing based on the data that we've gotten, whether we're improving, whether we need to start something, stop something, or pivot something that we're doing, and then of course a summary of next steps. So that'll be a total of 38 KPIs that we'll bring in October. Additionally, as mentioned at the most recent BESI meeting, or one of the recent BESI meetings, we do have a commitment to transparency, and we are going to work to make all of this information publicly accessible on a digital outward-facing platform. So we are in conversations right now about exploring what that can look like, working with our team to make that possible. It is our goal that by January of 2023, we would have all the ESSER initiatives in a public-facing platform, and by June 2023, we would have all of the initiatives of the agency in a digital platform accessible to you all as well as the public at large. So again, our commitments are that all of our investments should have a collective impact, that they should be strategic and priorities-based, and of course that we are held accountable and must be transparent for all of the investments that we're making. And so with that, our next update will be in October BESI. I actually think the October BESI is highlighted at the very end, and so I'll update with 2023. But with that, I will take any questions that you may have.
Ms. Holloway, before questions, we have been committed to public transparency around not just our dollars, it's the set-asides of the LEA dollars as well. We have our dashboard on LouisianaComeback.com that people often find helpful. One of the things that I hear sometimes, though, is that the public would like even additional information on where local school systems are budgeting, not just expending, but budgeting. And I think that we can make that available. And so I wanted, if you don't mind, Danielle, if you would pull up an example of what we also might make available so that individuals can see how local systems have fully budgeted their spending.
Yeah, absolutely. So As mentioned, all of our school systems budget their funds in a platform called EGMS, or the Electronic Grants Management System. And there is obviously the login portal where the school systems would go or internal teams would go, but there is also a public access where anyone can go and look at several different reports for school systems. So one of the things that would be helpful for just you all to understand is the ESSER budgets for ESSER 2 and 3 are in the Achieve application in EGMS. And so those funds started in 2020, 2021. So if I go, and I'll just click on the first one, and we can pull up another parish as well. But if I click on View Report, this is going to pull up all of the budgets, all of the programs that the school system budgeted for in that fiscal year. And I'm able to see down here, I go here, their ESSER dollars in the Achieve budget. But if I want to drill down to that, I can go to their actual application. And this will bring me to what their EGMS portal looks like. Again, this is public facing, so you're not necessarily changing anything in their application. But I'm going to find the Achieve application right here. And if I just click open, this is how the school systems actually go in and enter their budget. But I can click on their budget detail, and I can pull up, for example, we'll look at the first one, and this is their ESSER, they're using their ESSER $2 for the priority effective educator workforce, focus areas educator compensation, and I'm able to see an expenditure description and itemization. And so we're able to see that for any school system, for any grant programming. And so you're able to also go across different applications, different sections within the application. So if you just wanted to see, for example, like ESSER 2, you could do that. And we can look at, you want to look at like one more system, would that be helpful? So again, you're just going to the budget year of 2020, 2021. We can go to number 2. And we're just clicking View Report. Once we do that, we're going to click on the Go to Application Select page so that we can actually select the Achieve application. And once I do that, I just click Open, and it brings me to their overview page, and I can click on the Consolidated Detail Budget. And again, I'm able to see how they're investing their dollars specifically. Now, the other thing that you're able to do is look at their consolidated budget summary by focus area. So you can, it's a little bit higher level information, but you're able to find this information publicly.
And members of the board, I know that was quick, but if you have any questions about that or you want additional informational support on how to work through that application, just let us know and we're happy to follow up.
Sure, just one quick question. Are LEAs able to amend their budget throughout the year? And is there a cutoff to that, or can they amend it through the end of the fiscal year?
Yeah, great question. So the answer is yes. The school systems are able to adjust their budgets. Sorry, this is like popping. The school systems are able to adjust their budgets throughout the year. Obviously, we have quarterly reporting that our school systems are able to or submit their quarterly expenditure reports if they have an application in an approved status. Obviously, with like the close of fiscal year, as different funds are loaded, sometimes there are pauses in the application so that school systems can make those adjustments. But for the most part, in general, absolutely, our school systems can amend their budgets as their needs change.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Yes, Mr. Morris?
Yeah, I was looking at the calendar, slide 31. First quarter of ESSE only meets one time, it's in August. There's no update shown here. But in second quarter, there is an update in October. We talked about 38 KPIs. And we've done some testing. I was thinking that we have some results in that we could steward some KPIs potentially in quarter 1 at August ESSE so that we wouldn't get a 38 KPI dump in October. Is there any way we could get some of that a little earlier to kind of break that up a little bit?
So, funny you should ask that. We have to actually submit the board docs about a month prior to the meeting, which would mean that the documents would need to be prepared and uploaded and shared mid-July. And by then, we wouldn't have necessarily all sufficient data. But what I can do is maybe work with our data team and go through the KPIs and see what potentially could be available in the middle of July. And if there's a sufficient amount worthy of bringing an update to August, we could certainly have that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morris. Anyone else? That's it? Dr. Cronin, good? I'm good with this report. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very informative. Next item, please. Or any objections? Thank you. No objections. Motion carried. Next item, please.
On page 181, item 5.1, consideration of AG program and budget revisions on statewide grant programs for fiscal year 2021-2022. Recommendation is to approve.
Move, Mr. Roth. Yes, Dr. Davis. Any objections? Motion carried. Next item, please.
On page 191, item 6.1, consideration of legislative reports. Recommendation is to receive the reports in response to revised statute 17, section 10.9, and revised statute 17, section 22, paragraph 11. No.
Next.
Everything's in your packet.
I'm next.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I don't know, I'm going to get out of this. Okay. Any objections? Motion carried. Next item.
I'm ready, can you tell?
Mr. Clarby and Dr. Bovee, second. Any objections? Motion carried. Next item, please.
On page 259, item 6.2, consideration of an update report on the 2022 regular legislative session. Recommendation is to receive the report.
Dr. Brown.
Yeah, I just wanted to state that, you need a motion.
Motion, please. Yes, Mr. Rock and Mr. Garvey, seconded.
So we had a really strong legislative session. It was a strong education session altogether, but I really think much of the legislation that has passed aligns with our priorities as an agency and your priorities as a board. And I just want to commend Mr. Melanson for his tireless work over the course of session, as well as our team for being readily available to support him and support legislators. But from teacher workforce to school choice to math to literacy, we had some really strong wins, and just ask that Mr. Melanson kind of present some of that information to you.
Ethan Melanson, Executive Director of Governmental Affairs, Department of Education. So I thought I was done with the long committee meetings, but apparently I'm not really here. But I'm happy to give you an update. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for allowing me to represent you across the street at the Capitol. It's always an honor to do so on behalf of you and the students and educators across the state. So like Dr. Brumley had mentioned, we did have a very successful legislative session. We've heard from many people who have said that this was probably one of the heavier education sessions we've had in quite some time. So I do want to make sure that we really emphasize that the eye is on education when it comes to legislation, legislative sessions, more and more these days. But I want to go through a couple of the really big things that have passed and some questions that I've gotten from the board members. The first area I want to cover is academic content. These were some of the bills that were passed dealing with those. The first is House Bill 207. Most of these are still waiting for the governor's signature, by the way, so we're still waiting for governor action. This would add geometry and applied geometry as a required course for the Jumpstart Our Career Pathways. So that passed through. The other was House Bill 911 by Representative Hughes, so some groundbreaking literacy legislation that we discussed earlier today. This was the part that changed it to a literacy screener, and then also providing for literacy coaches in the classrooms. The next was Senate Bill 190 by Senator Hewitt. This created the Computer Science Education Act, which created a commission to oversee the creation of some way that we could move forward computer science standards in Louisiana and recommend them to the board and the legislature. And then the other academic content area worth mentioning was Senate Bill 191, also by Senator Hewitt, which added computer coding languages to a list of opportunity languages for the foreign language in schools. Moving on to career and technical education, we had a good bit done there. House Bill 470 by Representative McKnight created a data sharing agreement between the Department of Education and also Workforce Commission. That way we can track how our Jumpstart students are doing once they leave higher education or their credential after high school. This is something we've been working on for a while that we're really excited that we are finally able to see the impact of what Jumpstart is doing. The next is Senate Bill 261, which was by Chairman Fields. This was for post-secondary education transfer pathways, so dual enrollment, that plays a key part in this, to where those transfer credits will be done across the board. And then the final is Senate Bill 50, which is a career in tech, but also a school choice opportunity. This would allow a student to pick whichever fast-forward pathway in their district. So if, let's say they're attending a school that did not offer a fast-forward pathway, but another school is, this would allow them to be able to transfer to that school and participate in those learning activities. So moving on to school choice, we had some pretty big ones that I'm sure you've heard about in the news. The first is House Bill 194 by Representative Butler. This was the Education Savings Account bill for students with exceptionalities. That one passed through and is awaiting governor's signature, as well as Senate Bill 203 by Senator Hewitt, which was for literacy, an education savings account for students who read below grade level. And then another choice bill, this one failed actually, and I wanted to make sure that we brought it up. So if you remember in March, we decided to defer on learning policy because there was pending legislation. The legislation did not make it through the process, so we are now going to be bringing you that policy again at the August meeting. So I just wanted to give you an update about that one. Moving on to workforce, which is probably the one that we focused on the most during this session, dealing with the teacher crisis. One of the really big things that was done was that House Bill 546 by Representative Mincy removed the requirement for the Praxis Core. So that's the Praxis Core, which is the English proficiency to get into a teacher preparation program. This was a barrier to entrance. This is something that the Retention and Recovery Task Force had actually recommended. So we were able to remove that from law to where now you can get into a teacher program. We also removed it from the certification needs because that was just kicking the can for that test down the road. Another bill did very similar to that, but also changed some of the certification requirements, and that was Act 244, it's already been signed by the governor, by Senator Peacock, which changed the way that we do certification a little bit. So if you are graduated with a master's degree, let's say, in a certain subject area, you're able to go back into the classroom. You're able to go and work in a classroom as a teacher for 1 year. So each year you have to be rehired. That way you can continue through the program. You have to reach the level right below highly effective on your rating as a teacher, meaning that you have to be one of those or highly effective. After 5 years of doing this, you are able to become a certified teacher in the state of Louisiana. This was proposed primarily by the Senate President and pushed by the Senate President to try to fix some of the teacher shortage crisis. And we also had support on this bill from the teachers' unions as it moved through the process. So everyone was kind of on board with this, understanding the crisis that we're facing going forwards. Another big workforce change was Senate Bill 434 by Chairman Fields, which reintroduced the critical shortage area to allow the retire rehire situation. So this puts back in advertise for critical shortage in a teaching area, then they would be able to go back and rehire educators who retired previously without their benefit being suspended. So that was something that was a really big push. It does have a sunset date on it, so it's for a short amount of time, and we'll be able to work through that process with the next legislature.
That was 100%, or was that the 25% threshold?
So it's 100%. It's not at the 25% threshold. If you were in a critical shortage area, you are able to come back with your full benefit and receive it.
They still have to certify the best.
They still have to certify to Bessie that there is a critical shortage. Yes, ma'am.
Which very.
And those critical,
Mr. Ron.
the critical shortage with science, math, special ed.
Science, math, special ed, and I think it's the STEM fields. I can come back to that with an answer for you. I don't, off the top of my head, remember the three.
Someone on this side? Dr. Davis.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, Mr. Walsall mentioned the learning pods issue, and I cannot stress to you the urgency of us taking action on that in August. It was quite embarrassing to have Senator Mizell ask the department how many learning pods we had in the state of Louisiana and where were they located. And for Mr. Walsall to have to say that we do not know. And in fact, the only person that knows where these are that can answer the question was Ms. Nyland, the lobbyist for Charter School USA, who knew where. It turns out there were 7 of them, and she was able to list the parishes. And so I just think it's of critical importance that the Department of Education ought to know the location of learning pods that are supposed to be regulated or that we have oversight over type 2 charters. So. And then the second thing I'd like to say is that I would like to add an item to the August agenda surrounding our interaction with the legislature and how we are coming to decisions about bills. I was at the legislature quite a bit. I saw Mr. Garvey there quite often as well, and Mr. Morris. But I had many conversations with legislators, particularly in House Ed, that would like more interaction with Bessie members regarding our positions on matter of policy, which they are creating quite a bit at the legislature. In fact, several of them asked if it would be possible for them to have a meeting with Bessie before the legislature even started to get our opinion and our expertise on items that they were considering for legislation. And that also there was quite a bit of angst among legislators regarding how many neutral positions Bessie had. And I don't know if Mr. Walsall shares that opinion, that they are frustrated that Bessie is not providing them an opinion on legislation and that we have so many neutral positions. So I'd like for us to discuss in August ways that we have handled legislative matters in the past. I know at one point Bessie had a legislative committee that looked at things. I know now we're handling it as the officers making those calls, but I'd just like a discussion about whether or not there might be a way for us to improve our process of interacting with the legislature.
Any comments? Thank you, Dr. Davis, for that information. Dr.
Well, I want to call out one bill that I think is really important, and Mr. Walsall is going through a lot of bills, but on the teacher workforce issue, it was mentioned earlier that we have expanded educator pathways in our high schools throughout the state. I think we went from like 20 to 50-ish now in systems across the state, so we have about 50 systems now that have pre-educator pathways in the state of Louisiana. And so our idea was it would be really nice if we could scholarship some of those kids. And so we were able to pass legislation called the Go Teach Fund, which will give us the ability to provide scholarships to students. And rules have to be set around it, but the idea is if we have kids in educator pathways, we could provide really strong financial incentives for them to go into colleges, scholarship them with a commitment to come out and teach in Louisiana schools. And Ethan, if I'm correct, we received a $5 million initial allocation for the program. So it's really exciting. if you have pre-educator pathways in your high schools and you have kids participating and they earn tops, and then we're able to incentivize them beyond that, these students are going to get close to a full ride to our colleges if they will commit to being teachers. So we're really excited about that program as well.
Great, thank you. Ms. Holloway, I just wanted to note, Ethan mentioned it, but I really want to put it in the record. There was supposed to be an item for the learning pods brought to the board in June, but because it was so late in the process with the session, by the deadline that we had for board materials, there wouldn't have been anything to update. So we will definitely have that item in August. The deferral of the policy regarding learning pods was supposed to come in June, but it was not through the process, so we will definitely be on the August agenda. We didn't defer it as I normally would have. I totally forgot, so that was my error. Thank you. Mr. Garvey.
Yeah, in anticipation of Dr. Davis's issue going on the August agenda, I'd like to give a little preview or just a little discussion about it. There are a lot of bills that come up in the legislature that have to do with education that do not relate to positions that Bessie has had a long-standing history of support on. And we tried to narrow our bills that we took positions on only to those bills where we knew where Bessie stood, or where a majority of Bessie stood. There are some issues that I don't want to speak for the other officers, but I think them too, just don't know where Bessie would be. And I'll give you an example. One that came up very late in the session was trying to pass a bill to arm teachers or allow teachers to carry guns into schools. We don't have a history of having voted on that issue, definitely not a long history of having voted on that issue, and I didn't know where Bessie would come down on that, and we were being asked to take a position. And I said, I just don't know where we would be on that. So, and there's a lot of, if you go through the bills that we took no position on, a lot of them are similar to that. They're just issues that there's no real clear indication from Bessie of where we would be. Now, I had offered, I think I talked to Mr. Lawson and maybe the superintendent, that if we have a Bessie meeting during the legislative session, maybe if there are some issues that Bessie members want to take a vote on, we could do that, and maybe that's something we could look at doing for next year. Some controversial issues that some members said we need to take a vote on this, even though we don't have a history on it. Maybe that's a way to improve the situation. Throw that out as an idea. But the other problem you have is that bills change. If you take a vote on a bill mid-session, if we have a special Bessie meeting, as soon as that bill, a comma or a period gets moved in that bill, then Bessie's vote no longer really applies, or you could argue it that way. So I would throw that out as a caution if you're thinking about changing the system to include Bessie taking votes during a meeting on whether to support legislation or not. It's just an introduction to what we might be talking about in August.
Yes.
But not to weigh in on the process, that's not my role here, but I do want to compliment Mr. Garvey just on those calls, and one of the things that I know that he always tried to consider is where would the majority of the board fall on a particular issue, and if he did not feel that the board would not as a majority fall on a particular area, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but you would stay neutral and not take a particular position unless you felt, and the rest of the officers felt really confident. So not trying to weigh in on process, but I did just want to offer that to the rest of the board that was something that you took very seriously.
A recurring comment that we mentioned at a lot of meetings.
Or an example would be curriculum versus others too, so we don't, weigh in on that. I mean, there were just different areas, and Ethan, you just led us really well in all the information that you gathered too, so, yes.
You're talking to me?
Dr. Bowman.
Okay.
Mr. Lawson, I would like this spreadsheet sorted by the ones that actually passed, so I don't have to go through the ones that failed. And then I see you have a bill description. Do you have something that's like a little more than a description but not requires me to read the whole bill?
Yeah, so I can provide that for you for the ones that pass. If you would like, I can provide that for you for the ones that you're interested in. We did have a lot of bills that passed, but if you would like me to detail out with a digest of what passed, what didn't.
I think if we start by getting rid of the ones that failed, and then getting that, like another layer of description, a little deeper than what we have here, would be very helpful.
Yes, ma'am, and in August, so what happens is, this is just the update to the existing tracker we had, so I had to let you know where everything fell. In August, just like last year, I'll bring you what we're calling the Bessie Legislative Plan of Action, which is everything that did pass. It's gonna be a description of what it was, and then the action we have to do on the backside of it, so the policy revisions that need to happen. And it'll say when we bring that to you, when you should expect reports, for legislative reports that have to go over. So there'll be a deep dive in August that you'll get, but that'll clear out the fail from what passed.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Tester.
Thank you. I want to follow up on Mr. Garvey's comment, because I appreciate the difficulty, because he's absolutely correct in that you change a comma and move a couple words here and there, the legislation may have a very different meaning, and that may happen on the fly. I'm wondering, in terms of what Dr. Davis brought up, whether it's a committee or whatever the process is there a way to get ahead of some of the legislation that's being sponsored? So what happens is that you have a group or a person that appeals to a particular legislator to sponsor a bill, and is there a way in the process, in the pre-filing process or ahead of that there are key groups that typically will want to bring pieces of legislation? I don't know if there's a way to at least get in front so that it gives Bessie an opportunity to at least consider it. Because I do agree we've got to then delegate authority to our leadership to be able to make decisions on the fly, because the bill may change quickly. But I'm interested in what can we do to improve the process. I know our leaders are doing the best job that they can do, and it's a difficult one. And Ethan, thank you for your hard work. I know it's challenging, but I would be interested in further exploring what we can do better to engage in the process, because I did hear a number of times, so why is Bessie not weighing in? Maybe it may be just a matter of communicating in part what Mr. Garvey said, that when you folks change things every day, it's kind of hard to react to so quickly. But I think it's worth having that conversation.
Very good. Yes.
Yeah, I would add one thing to what the superintendent was saying. The conversations we had was not just where do we think 6 members of Bessie would be on this issue or that issue or that issue, but really where we feel very certain 6 members would be. It's not just, where might 6 members be, but if we weren't fairly certain, we were hesitant to take a position, because I'd hate to commit this board to something that I would be wrong in committing them to. That was my thought.
Thank you. Dr. Davis.
Just 2 quick things. One, I apologize, Mr. Castile, because you were in the legislature too. We testified against a bill together, and I'm sorry that I omitted that. I have one question to ask, and this is about a bill that Mr. Melanson mentioned about the retirement, so allowing teachers to come out of retirement. Dr. Loppy and I both noted that we only had a handful of districts that declared a critical shortage for us to vote on today, right? And so we accepted that report. So that means if districts don't get that to us for that August meeting, that they're not going to be able to hire retired teachers, correct?
We get those quarterly.
We get them quarterly, so so that's concerning to me that districts might have their hands tied in that. And so is there a way for us to make sure that districts know that legislation, I mean, I would hope that maybe the School Boards Association and other groups are letting them know, but that seems kind of shocking that we only had 4 or
Is
5
that the
districts.
report, Holland, you were referring to today? That we
Yeah.
had like 5,
Yeah.
maybe?
It wasn't even a full sheet of paper.
Yeah.
That worries me.
Good one.
They just have to send it in, it's not stalled or anything. It doesn't weigh on you're receiving
It
it.
doesn't affect, your concern is the fact.
So we don't have to vote on it or anything, they can just send it to us and we're
Send it
good?
to us
Oh,
and
good,
yes.
okay. That makes me feel better, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions here? Yes, Mr. Morris?
Yeah, just 2 quick ones. A constituent asked me about EP 191, the computer science as a foreign language option. If that one gets signed, then there's a committee that's supposed to be designated to work with that initiative.
190 is the one that has a committee. 191 is the one with foreign language. So 190 is the one that creates the committee for computer science, not 191. But
Okay.
191 would be impacted by the committee that meets because they would then create a standard or recommend a standard to Bessie for computer science, which would include a standard for computer languages and coding.
That's what I'm looking for. So she wanted to know how those seats get appointed. They get appointed by Bessie or the governor, or how?
So they're laid out in the legislation of who would be on there, and I can provide a list of that.
Can you shoot me an email with that?
Sure can.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was with regard to the agenda today. I see that we're looking at item 7 next. I had a couple of questions about Act 224 report. Is somebody going to speak to that? Is that item 6.2 or where does that?
No, that was RS 1722, paragraph 11. That's when it became statute.
I think he's asking, where is it included?
Yeah.
It was on 6.1.
6.1.
191, page 191.
Okay, and we're on 6.2 right now, is that right? Okay. So I had a couple of questions about that report. Any chance we could?
Sure. Oh, yes, he's asking, are we done with 6.2? You want to go to 6.1?
Yeah, I don't think
Ethan,
anybody
you can-
addressed the report.
Consideration of a legislative report,
What report is that?
is that page 191?
I'm looking at 217 in my handout.
We have someone that's going to address that report.
Justice reform, to receive the. Let's finish this item here. 6.2, any other questions on 6.2? Not any objection, motion carried. There's a request to go back to 6.1. And who?
We're happy to have conversation after the meeting with Mr. Morris unless it's something you need for the entire audit.
Oh, that's fine. We can cover it after the meeting. Just keep it going.
If nothing else, on the top of what's here, because it's all great.
I do actually have one question there.
For 6.1, Mr. Castillo?
Yeah, it's all board docs.
Board docs?
I do actually, Paul, I do actually have one question. I'd like to the full board
Sure.
to engage with.
Go ahead, Mr. Morris. You're good.
Are we done with 6.2?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, Act 224 report on page 221. I have 2 questions. That's my first question. So on page 221, there's a graph of subgroup enrollment. With that.
You go right ahead. 221. Right.
Page
Yeah,
221.
subgroup enrollment.
Yeah, so my question was, the representation here of English language learners, which is the bottom line, it's flat from 2012 to 2021. My understanding was that there's a significant increase in the population of ELL students. I'm just surprised that that's shown to be flat. We're not showing an increase in ELL students in the state?
I can have someone speak to that. You're talking about, this is as a percentage of the entire student population. So it would take massive numbers to shift that significantly. So I mean, that is considerable growth.
We're showing no change the last 3 years. 4% the last 3 years.
We can get you the actual numbers. But, I mean, I'm not surprised by the percentages not changing there.
Okay. I was surprised. I thought there was a significant increase in that student population, so if you could help me out with that, I appreciate it. The only other question I had was on page 256, slide 40 in that deck. And it says each year the department releases statewide, regional, school system, and school level educator workforce reports. I'm not familiar with that. I was just wondering if somebody could speak to that, given the teacher shortage and the focus here. I'm really interested in some level of detail, not only where we are now, but what the plan is going forward to address that concern. So if somebody could speak to that specific report and what we should be expecting there.
I think Jim Cooper can speak to that. I know that tomorrow we have an agenda item on this with the shared meeting with Board of Regents, but you can do this now as well.
Well, it says each year, so that sounds to me like more than one report, so I'm just trying to understand.
So each year, we produce a workforce report for every school system. So it's the data that is submitted on an annual basis. We've now transitioned this into a new system. We also produce a statewide snapshot of a workforce report as well that's will be released in a few months. But the data included for a school system is about the percent of certified teachers, uncertified teachers, their retention rate, Compass scores, other data that we collect, but it's specific to that school system. And again, we have a statewide report as well.
So is that something that comes to Bessie annually?
The statewide snapshot will, but each individual school system's report just goes directly to that school system.
Okay. When should we expect to see something on that?
The statewide report will be released in August, so depending on the date, either August Bessie or October Bessie.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any objections? Motion carried. Next item, please. Last item, 7.1.
On page 268, item 7.1, consideration of revisions to the Louisiana Administrative Code, Title 28, Part 1, regarding ad hoc authority of the Bessie President and authority and delegation of contracts for professional consulting and social services. Recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Motion, please. Mr. Garvey, seconded by Mr. Morris.
Yeah, this is as a result of us not having clear policy in emergency situations. We went ahead and worked as a department with Mr. Garvey and Davis. We drafted policy that clarifies gray area moving forward for situations such as this, and so that policy is available to you, and I believe it has a recommendation to approve instead.
That's right. Yes, Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, I would like to point out to the board what I would consider a significant change. That the issue came up during the pandemic when the governor suspended a lot of the rules, and one of the big reasons behind that was that there were contracts that needed to be issued during the pandemic when Bessie could not meet. And our policy said roughly that during emergency situations, the board president and I think the finance chair can approve contracts subject to ratification of Bessie at the next meeting. And if you think about that, if you have an emergency situation and you need to get a contract started working on, and let's say it's several $100,000 worth of work, if I were the company planning to do that work, and I knew that the board president was approving it, but only subject to ratification that may or may not happen at the next meeting several months down the road, I would be very hesitant to start working on that work until it was ratified. So this changes that and says that the ratification is removed. the Bessie president and the chair of finance can make that decision only when the governor has suspended most of the other rules. So there is some safeguard that Bessie should feel, this is not going to happen all the time. And the provisions in here say that we will notify Bessie members within 24 hours, so that if any 6 members say, wait a minute, I don't think this looks good, I want to call a special call meeting and undo what has been done, that can be done, and so that should give Bessie members some comfort also. So it will allow us to react during emergency situations when the governor thinks it's enough of an emergency, suspend most procurement rules, but yet allow Bessie members to overrule any action with the special call meeting coming within a day or so after they're notified. It seems like a big change to me. I want to make sure y'all were aware of it.
And that's only applying to contracts. So if it's for things like a waiver or some minor thing, then that still would be subject to ratification.
And it still has to be approved by the superintendent, so that's a third person that you can rely
So
on.
only the
watching out
contracts
for
are
you.
not subject to ratification, and only in emergency situations.
And there are other rules that apply saying that the prices in the contract have to be within normal price ranges. That's.
And the chair of finance too.
Any questions? Very good. Thank you for working on that. Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? All right. Without any objection, motion carried and meeting adjourned. Thank you.